Hello, this is the Ramblings of an Indisciplined Mind podcast for Tuesday, July 12th, 2016. As of this recording, Sierra is still missing. So, yesterday I was talking about when we were at the ball game, and they had this Quick Change Act, and they billed it as the America's Got Talent Quick Change Act. And I think they gave their names when they first introduced them. It was a couple, man and a woman, and they come out, and he's in like tails, tux and tails, and looking like he's got a lot of clothes on. As it turned out, he didn't. He just had a bit of a gut to him. And then this woman, she comes out in this real floor-length gown with really elaborate, long sleeved, and they came out twice and did like a little mini show with like 3 or 4 quick changes, and I think they did maybe the like in the second inning or the third inning maybe, and the 5th inning, something like that. And then at the end of between the 7th and the 8th inning, they came out and they did a little bit longer show. And they probably did, I'm going to say about 10 minutes. The players were kind of standing around waiting to get their ball field back. That's probably one of the joys of minor league ball, is that they do these other things and you just got to kind of stand around and wait. And they don't make you do that in the majors. So especially for the early shows, the tricks that they did were to be expected for a Quick Change Act. I've seen a couple of videos on YouTube, and that they would have several of these were essentially like large fabric bags, big enough that you could put somebody in, and then on the open end of it they've got like metal, so it's stiff, and so the woman would get into it, step into it, and he would pick up this metal end and hold it up above her head, so she's totally encased in this thing, and you'd see movement going on. I think most of it was probably just move it, and then he would drop it, and she'd be standing there in something totally different, and then she'd step out. And they would always do this thing where they wouldn't just let it stay like that. They would always flip the end over so you couldn't see inside. And it was one of the things that was interesting about this, is because being in a ballpark, we got to see them from a couple different angles. So like the first time they came out, they were on the first base side, but they weren't right in front of us. They were off to the right a bit. And so we were seeing them at a little bit of an oblique angle. And so at one point when she was stepping out after having changed, she'd had a yellow something on before. And as she's stepping out, you can see the yellow fabric of the previous dress there, on the floor, until he flipped the thing over so you couldn't see it. So those were, I understand the mechanics. I don't know exactly how it works, but obviously, if she's got multiple outfits on, and they have a way of, breakaway stuff or whatever, but they have a way where they can very quickly pull it off. And so just in a matter of seconds, they pulled that off, and they put something new on. So, that trick, I feel like, I don't know exactly how they're doing it, but I do feel like I can conceive of how they're doing it. Let's put it that way. But then there were the other tricks. So one of the ones that was really cool that they did a couple times was they had this ring ring of metal, and they had all these streamers hanging down off of it. So if you held it like at about neck level, it went down to like to her calf, say. And she would hold it there. She put it over, and they move it around. And you can, these are like strips of fabric, so they're moving, and you can kind of see through them. But she'd hold it up there at neck level for just long enough so that most of the strips stopped moving, and then she'd drop it, and she'd have a different outfit on. Now, what's really cool about that is then they would pick up the ring, and there's no dress lying on the ground, but she's in something totally different. And they did that a couple of times, and that was really neat because you don't see what's happening. You feel like you get the sense with the bag thing, and then they do that. But probably the coolest of the effects, when they came out the second time, they were standing on the third base line. So we're literally looking at them on the side when they're doing that. And there were two effects that they did that were just really, they did, I think they did the hoop thing again, but they did this one effect where he's standing there and she's like right behind him, and she's got I think it was a pink dress on, and he throws up, he's got this white stuff in his hand, and he throws it up, and it's like all these paper cutouts of dots. And as they fall in, she steps out, and now her dress, and actually I noticed it before she stepped out, but as the dots are falling, all of a sudden her dress has got white dots all over it. Big white dots. I mean, we're not talking little inch, I mean, we're talking 2 or 3 inches across. And you know, and she was just, granted, the people that were right in front couldn't see her, but I could see her, and I didn't see the transition. The other one that was really cool is they had this one where they had this big long piece of fabric with a stiff pole on one end, and she had on, at that point, her dress was blue, I believe, if I remember correctly. And he just kind of ran it. You know, he's kind of doing lots of you know, things with this fabric, and just kind of being really snaking it around and, you know, being artistic with it. And then he gets it in front of her, and he basically comes from in front and he runs it, and he runs this fabric over her. So from the front, you're just seeing the fabric moving kind of over her form. It's kind of just floating because he's pulling it. But I could see her sideways, and you know, 1 second she's got a blue dress on, and then the next second she's got a purple dress on that matches the fabric color that was going over. Of course, when the fabric goes away, you know, she's not standing on anything, she's standing on grass. There's no dress below her. So what happened to the blue dress? No clue. And then for their big finale show, the very last thing they did, and they'd actually put a tarp down, and this is why, and it's still, they had to pick some up from the grass, and there was more that they didn't get. They did once again something where she had some dress on, I forget what it was, and he threw up a bunch of glitter. It was like big pieces of glitter, but it was like a glittery kind of thing, and it came up on, and it came down over her, and all of a sudden her dress transformed into this rainbow of colors, and it just had one shoulder strap that was glitter, you know, and that was really cool. And then the other thing that was really neat, at one point in their longer show, you know, so all of the transformations had been her, and he actually had a different, I think he had like a blue, you know, still tux tails kind of thing, but it was blue. But they did this thing where they had a top hat, and he had gloves on that I think matched the blue of his outfit. And they did all these different ways of doing things, but you know, it started off with her holding the hat open end toward him, and he just stuffed his hands into it and pulled them back out, and his gloves changed color. And so it went through this whole kaleidoscope, and they were doing it in different ways, you know, but it was just really fast. I mean, he'd stuff them in, he'd pull them out, and you know, they went from, you know, blue to green to yellow to red to maybe like a lighter blue kind of thing. He did it several times, and that was really cool. And then at the very end, he went into one of those bag things, and when it dropped, he no longer was wearing a tux. He had white pants on, and he had the jersey for the Beavers, actually the team we were rooting for. on, and that was how they ended it. And it was a cool show. I mean, I would love to see. I've seen some how-to videos on how some illusions are done. I've yet to be able to find one that shows how they do these kind of quick change things, and I'd be interested in kind of knowing the mechanics of that, especially for the really cool tricks where you can't just shed some clothing and leave them behind in the bag, but you got to do something else with it. So it was an interesting time, and it's cool that you can watch something like that is part just mechanics, but yet you had 3 or 4 really cool illusions there that we're watching from a variety of angles, and I can't sit here and say that's how they did that. To me, that's the mark of a really cool act. So that was fun. I would watch an act like that again, and I enjoyed that probably more than I really thought. I knew they were going to be there because I saw that was the gimmick for that night. But I enjoyed that probably more than I really thought I was gonna. But I think I will let that be that for today. I will be back tomorrow. I'll be talking to you then. So, be seeing you.